The Book of Enoch is one of the most ancient, most mysterious, and most suppressed texts in all of human history. It is not merely an obscure religious document, but a window into a forgotten world, a world of fallen angels, cosmic judgment, and divine secrets that powerful institutions have tried for centuries to erase. But what exactly does this book contain? Why was it removed from the biblical canon despite being quoted in Scripture itself? And what does it reveal about the nature of angels, the origins of evil, and the fate of humanity? According to ancient Jewish tradition and early Christian writings, this text was penned by Enoch himself, a man so righteous that God took him from the earth without death. Yet, its contents were deemed too dangerous, too unsettling, too vast for ordinary believers to encounter. This was not a book that was simply forgotten, it was deliberately buried. Many of its revelations remain hidden in plain sight, preserved in Ethiopian churches, scattered among the Dead Sea Scrolls, and echoed throughout the very Bible that excluded it. What secrets does it hold? What warnings does it carry for our time? Join us as we unravel the mysteries of the Book of Enoch, its visions, its prophecies, and its profound implications for faith and history. If you find this fascinating, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now, let's step back into an age before recorded history to uncover the man behind the most suppressed book ever written, Enoch, the man who never died. The story of the Book of Enoch begins with its author, a figure unlike any other in the biblical record. Enoch was the seventh generation from Adam, born through the righteous line of Seth. In a genealogy where every patriarch follows the same formula: they lived, they had children, they died, Enoch stands apart as the single exception. Genesis 5:24 records his departure from the world in just 5 words. God took him. No grave, no final breath, no burial. Just a man who walked so closely with his Creator that death itself had no claim on him. This was no ordinary man. Ancient Jewish tradition describes Enoch as a scribe of righteousness, a prophet who received divine visions and communicated them to both humanity and the heavenly hosts. He lived for 365 years, a number that many scholars note corresponds to the days of the solar year, suggesting a figure intimately connected with cosmic rhythms and divine order. His son Methuselah would go on to become the longest living person in recorded scripture, and his great-grandson Noah would be chosen to survive the Great Flood. Enoch stood at the center of a lineage that would preserve humanity through its darkest hour. But it was not his lineage alone that set him apart. It was what he saw. According to the book that bears his name, Enoch was carried through the heavens, shown the storehouses of the stars, the chambers of the dead, the prison of fallen angels, and the throne of God itself. He was appointed as a messenger between the divine and the earthly, and his writings were meant to serve as a warning not for his own generation, but for a distant future age. The Book of Enoch opens with a striking declaration that the visions within it were not given for the people of Enoch's time, but for a remote generation yet to come. Many who have studied its pages believe that generation is our own, the Watchers and their forbidden descent. Perhaps the most explosive revelation in the Book of Enoch concerns a group of divine beings known as the Watchers. In the canonical book of Genesis, their story is compressed into just a few verses. Genesis 6:2 records that the sons of God saw the daughters of men, that they were beautiful, and they took wives for themselves. Most readers pass over this passage without fully grasping its weight. The Book of Enoch tears it open and forces the reader to confront what it actually means. According to 1 Enoch, chapters 6-9, 200 watchers, celestial beings, originally assigned to observe and guide humanity, made a collective decision to abandon their heavenly station. Their leader, named Semyaza, gathered them on the summit of Mount Hermon, a location whose very name carries within it the Hebrew root for oath and consecration. There, They swore a binding vow together, a pact sealed in shared transgression. They would descend, they would take human wives, and they would change the course of creation forever. The consequences were catastrophic. Their offspring, the Nephilim, were beings of extraordinary size and strength who rapidly consumed the resources of the earth. The Book of Enoch describes them as giants who devoured everything humanity produced, and when the food ran out, turned their hunger toward the people themselves. Violence spread across the earth like a plague. The cries of humanity rose up to the heavens, and the angels, Michael, Uriel, Raphael, and Gabriel, carried the report before God. The earth, they said, had become a place of unceasing bloodshed and oppression, and the souls of the dead cried out for justice. But the physical corruption of the Watchers was not their only crime. They also taught. Semyaza introduced enchantments and the knowledge of root-cutting. Azazel revealed the secrets of metallurgy, how to forge swords, knives, shields, and armor, and with that knowledge came endless warfare. Other Watchers taught astrology, divination, sorcery, and the use of cosmetics and ornamentation, which the text presents not as trivial vanity, but as tools of seduction and spiritual distraction. This was not incidental corruption. It was a deliberate curriculum, a systematic introduction of forbidden knowledge into a world that was not prepared to wield it responsibly. The judgment of the Watchers. When the cries of humanity reached the heavens, God's response was swift and precise. 4 archangels were dispatched with specific assignments, each one targeting a different dimension of the catastrophe the Watchers had unleashed. Raphael was sent to bind Azazel hand and foot and cast him into a desert called Dudael, where he was to be buried under rocks and darkness until the final day of judgment, when he would be thrown into fire forever. The text explicitly states that all sin was ascribed to Azazel, that the responsibility for the corruption of humanity was placed upon him as its primary architect. Gabriel was sent against the Nephilim themselves. They were to be turned against one another, driven to destroy each other in warfare. Their end was not to come through divine lightning or a heavenly army, but through the violence they had themselves introduced into the world. The text also declares that the spirits of the Nephilim, once their bodies perished, would not pass to the place reserved for the righteous or even for ordinary human souls. They had no portion in the afterlife because they were never supposed to have had a life at all. Their spirits would wander the earth as evil forces, afflicting, oppressing, and deceiving humanity until the final judgment. This declaration in the Book of Enoch is one of the most significant and most overlooked passages in all of ancient religious literature. It offers an explanation for the existence of demonic entities that is entirely consistent with the broader biblical narrative. The demons that appear throughout Scripture and that spiritual practitioners across every culture have reported encountering for millennia may, according to this text, be the displaced souls of a race that violated the boundary of creation itself. They are not fallen angels. They are the orphaned offspring of a union that God never sanctioned, wandering a world they were never supposed to inhabit. Enoch's journey through the heavens. Among the most remarkable passages in the entire text are the accounts of Enoch's own travels through the cosmic realms. After the Watchers, facing divine judgment, asked Enoch to intercede on their behalf before God, an extraordinary request, a supernatural being asking a mortal man to plead their case. Enoch agreed. He composed a petition, sat beside the waters of Dan near the headwaters of the Jordan River, and fell into a vision. What he experienced in that vision has no parallel in the biblical canon. He was carried upward through layers of reality. He passed through a wall of white marble surrounded by fire. He entered a house built of hailstones, its floor of snow, its ceiling made of stars and flashing lightning. Beyond that was a second structure, larger and more overwhelming than the first, and within it a throne of crystal with wheels like the shining sun, surrounded by rivers of fire. The one seated on the throne wore a garment brighter than the sun and whiter than any snow. No angel could enter that innermost space. No creature of flesh and blood could stand in it and remain unchanged, and yet Enoch was called forward. God denied the petition of the watchers and delivered the reason through Enoch himself. They were created as heavenly beings who should have interceded on behalf of humanity. Instead, humanity was now interceding for them. Their transgression had inverted the divine order, and there would be no restoration. Their judgment was sealed. Enoch's journeys continued. He was shown the place where the dead await judgment, a vast and differentiated realm with separate chambers for the righteous, for sinners who received partial justice in life, and for those who were oppressed and found no earthly remedy. He was shown the tree of life, preserved beyond the reach of any living human, fragrant and radiant, waiting to be given to the righteous in the age of restoration. He was shown the prison of the stars' celestial bodies described as living beings who had failed to appear at their appointed times, now held in fire awaiting the completion of their sentence. The cosmos, in Enoch's vision, is not a mechanical system, it is a moral order. Everything in it has a purpose, a role, and an accountability. The Son of Man, Enoch's most astonishing vision. Among all the revelations in the book of Enoch, none is more theologically significant than what appears in the section known as the similitudes, or the parables of Enoch. In these chapters, Enoch sees a figure whom the text calls the Son of Man. His face was full of graciousness, like one of the holy angels. But he was far more than an angel. He existed before the creation of the world, hidden in the presence of God. His name was spoken before the sun and the moon were made. He will sit upon the throne of glory and judge the living and the dead. He will cause kings and rulers to be cast down from their seats of power. He will be a light to the nations and the hope of those whose spirits are troubled. This text predates the New Testament by at least a century, and by some scholarly estimates, considerably longer. And yet the imagery, the titles, and the precise role assigned to this figure mirror what the Gospels say about Jesus of Nazareth, with a specificity that cannot be dismissed as coincidence. When Jesus stood before the Sanhedrin and the high priest asked him directly whether he was the Son of God, Jesus responded with language drawn from Daniel, but the title he claimed for himself, the Son of Man, carried its fullest and most cosmic meaning not in Daniel, but in Enoch. The people of his era who had access to this text would have immediately understood the magnitude of what was being claimed. Not merely prophetic authority, not simply divine favor, but pre-existence, cosmic sovereignty, and the role of the final judge of all humanity. Why was the Book of Enoch suppressed? Given its profound content and its clear influence on both Jewish and early Christian thought, the question that demands an answer is why the Book of Enoch was excluded from the biblical canon. The answer is not simple, and scholars continue to debate it. Some argue that the book was considered pseudepigraphical, written in Enoch's name by a later author, and therefore not genuinely ancient enough to be authoritative. Others suggest that its elaborate cosmology, with its detailed descriptions of heavenly realms, angelic hierarchies, and supernatural geography, was deemed too difficult to reconcile with the theological frameworks that institutional religion preferred to maintain. There is also the political dimension. The similitudes of Enoch are relentlessly focused on the judgment of the powerful. Kings who oppress the poor, rulers who accumulate wealth through injustice, leaders who turn away from divine law. The text declares their destruction in terms that are vivid and absolute. For a church that had become deeply entangled with imperial power by the 4th and 5th centuries, a text that promised the violent overthrow of earthly rulers by a divine Son of Man may have presented certain inconveniences. And yet the canonical Bible itself refused to fully let go of Enoch. The Epistle of Jude, accepted as scripture by every major Christian tradition, contains a direct quotation from the Book of Enoch. See, the Lord is coming with thousands upon thousands of his holy ones to judge everyone. This is not a paraphrase or a loose allusion. It is a citation, placed without qualification in a letter the Church has read as authoritative for 2,000 years. The book that was buried is quoted in the book that was not. That fact alone should give every serious student of Scripture reason to pause. What the Book of Enoch means for us today. The Book of Enoch is not merely a historical curiosity. Its themes, the corruption of knowledge, the abuse of power, the rebellion of created beings against their Creator, and the assurance of ultimate justice are not confined to the distant past. They speak directly to the world we inhabit now. The text reminds us that the chaos of human history has roots deeper than human decision-making. Something was introduced into the story of this world that was not part of the original design. The violence, the corruption, the sense that something is fundamentally wrong beneath the surface of civilization. The Book of Enoch suggests these things have a history that predates recorded memory. And yet the same text that diagnoses the problem also announces its resolution. The Son of Man is coming. The powerful will be brought low. The oppressed will be vindicated. Every injustice that was swallowed in silence will be answered. Enoch himself is perhaps the most powerful figure in the entire narrative. He lived in a generation that the text describes as overrun with violence, corruption, and supernatural evil. He was surrounded on every side by the evidence of a world that had abandoned its divine purpose. And yet he walked with God, not in retreat, not in denial, but in full awareness of what was happening around him, with eyes open, moving forward. That is the life the Book of Enoch ultimately holds up as the human ideal. Not power, not knowledge, not survival, just faithfulness, in the middle of a broken world, directed toward the one on the throne. The question this ancient text leaves with every person who encounters it is the same question it has always asked. In an age of forbidden knowledge and moral confusion, of powerful systems and unseen forces, of injustice that often goes unanswered, what kind of person will you choose to be? The path that Enoch walked is still open. It has always been open. The real question is whether you are willing to take it. What are your thoughts on the Book of Enoch and its place in biblical history? Do you believe it should have remained in the canon? Share your reflections in the comments below. And if you found this discussion insightful, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more explorations into biblical history and ancient mysteries.